mentioned that the Lamites Malachos on Shabbos, the 39 categories of creative activity, and the reason why the classified as 39 is to understand which are the primary Malachos and what are the subcategories of that. And the halachic differences in terms of if one violates any of them inadvertently, how many sin offerings do you have to bring? If it's the subcategories of the primary halacha, and you do it multiple times during one unawareness, you only bring one chatos. But if you violate two primary halachas categories inadvertently, you must bring two chatos. We gave the example. If the Gemara says in Shabbos that if a person reaps, you cut wood off a tree for because you need kindling wood. What are you in violation of? You're in violation of kotzer, reaping. What about if the reason why you're cutting the wood off the tree is to prune the tree? Pruning enhances the growth of the tree, so it's a subcategory of notea. The primary class malacha is putting the sapling in the ground. Pruning the tree, the effect has a semblance of what planting is because it enhances the growth of the tree. So a person inadvertently, let's say, prunes on Shabbos, and he puts a shrub in the ground on Shabbos, thinking it's Sunday morning, and then he realizes he'd made a mistake, he brings one chatos. Because both putting the shrub in the ground and pruning the tree and watering the tree, those are subcategories of planting. So he brings one chatos. What happens if when he cuts the branch off that tree, he has a dual intent? He's pruning the tree to enhance its growth, and also he wants the wood for kindling wood. So that means he intended to do notea, which is pruning, which is subcategory of notea, and he had in mind to do kotzer. This is the bona fide kotzer, reaping. He cut the wood, which is growing from its source of growth, that's kotzer. If he does that one action, believing it's Sunday morning, how many chatos does he have to bring? He has to bring two, because he was in violation of two categories of malacha. Okay, so 39 is essential, but let's say pruning would be classified as a separate malacha, besides planting, and he did it during one inadvertency, he'd have to bring the chatos for pruning and for planting and for watering. So knowing the number of classifications, we're able to understand what are the primary categories or what are subcategories of those malachos. So we said that Rabbi Yochanan says, where is it alluded to? Because there's Eila Hadvorim. Eila is 36, Dvorim is 2, Hadvorim is the third, so that we have 39. That's the Bara. Within the Balaturim says something beautiful. It says, Eila Dvorim Asher Tziva Hashem Lasososam. It's the beginning of the parsha. The word lasos normally is written how? It's written with the vav, what we call moli. The vav is deleted in the word lasos. So the Baal Turim says over here, lasos, osios, lamed tesha. The word lasos is lamed, is 30, tesha is 9. Without the vav, right? Lamed, tav shin ayin. If you read the letters backwards, that's lamed tesha. That's how we have lamed tes. He says, Chen asher bor Elokim lasos, hakosav yechulu timtza, asios, brios, melochos, vavoyos, fotzos, avdos, kulum lamed tes. Okay? There are 39, continually there's an allusion to 39 words. Sheishes, the word sheishes, bigamachis arboim chosarachas. Sheishes, the miracle value is the words arboim chosarachas, 40 minus 1. That's 39. So we find that the words themselves, the number of words, alludes to this concept of 39. 39 malachos. Now it's interesting. You find, where else do we find 39? If a person violates a negative commandment deliberately and he's forewarned, he receives Malchus. What's Malchus? Malchus is 39. 39 Malchus, lashes. But of course, if they evaluate him, see if he's able to tolerate that much pain. Because if he's going to die under the whip before he reaches 39, he gets less. But in terms of what are Malchus 39, we're saying now, what are 39? The 39 Malachos in their totality encompasses the totality of existence. Remember, we said that the Mishkan is a microcosm of creation, and the 39 Malachos, which we learned from the building of the Mishkan, those Malachos in the physical sense correspond to the energies which were extended by Hashem to bring about a creation. So the totality of creation is encompassed in 39, in the 39 Malachos. When a person goes and violates a negative commandment, violating a negative command is a diminishment in your spirituality. There's a question which is asked by Ramchal, beautiful question. If you'd have a master painting, Rembrandt, because of who he was in terms of his ability, whatever he does, it reveals and displays his genius and his ability. So when you look at that painting, you see the ability and the genius in terms of the painter who painted that, the master who painted that painting. So he asks, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof, if Hashem is infinite, which he is, so he created a world, and what is the world? The world is the smallest planet in existence. And what is the value of existence? Creation was only for the human being, specifically for the Jew, for the Torah. You would think he would create a world which is greater, planet which is larger than all the planets combined. And he has the ability. And when a creator creates, he's always displaying his ability. So why did Hashem display his ability when he created the world? That's what the Ramchal touches upon. Many appellations for Hashem. One of the appellations is Shakai. What is Shakai? Shekol Chodai. What does Shekol Chodai mean? When God said, let there be light, let there be anything, the energy that was released comes from the source, which is infinite. Hashem had to rein in on that energy. It should not go beyond a certain point. So the meaning of Shakai is Shekol Chodai. He said, up to this point, not beyond the point. I'll give you an example. The ocean, it comes in with a ferocity, and when it comes to the shore, the sea line, the seashore, it breaks. It comes in like a lion, and then all of a sudden it becomes docile as it comes into the shore. I mean, it's coming with such force, it should inundate the land, the earth, but it doesn't. The way Hashem created the world, it comes with a force, and it's based on psukim in describing this. Hashem reins in on that force because Hashem wants existence to exist, and dry land is the location of mankind. So as much as there's this ocean and the majority of the world is covered with that ocean, it's contained where Hashem wants to be contained. It doesn't go beyond that point. So that's kochod dai. His koach is, he says, die up to this point, not further. Where do we find something similar? We find the meaning in Vayikra. It says, Vayikra Elov Hashem mi'ol moed. We say in Mizmor LeDavid, Kol Hashem b'koach, Kol Hashem b'ador, that the audibility of Hashem's voice when he spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ol Moed, was no less than Sinai. Because we said, because that is the equivalent of Sinai, and when Hashem gave the Torah, as we explained it then, to the Shishim Ribo, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the equivalent of the totality of Klal Yisrael, so it had to be given in that context. If anybody stood outside the Ol Moed, did they hear that voice? The voice of Hashem communicating with Moshe Rabbeinu, although it had that level of audibility that millions of people were able to hear it, like Sinai. Hashem said, this Rashi cites the Chazal, that the voice only went to the wall of Ol Moed, did not go beyond the confines of that wall. And you understand, there was no soundproofing in that. Because Hashem says the voice doesn't go beyond that point. That's the way it is. That's also an indication of shkochu dai. Although its koach is unending, when he says up to this point, there's going to be on that point. That's kochu dai. So Ramchal answers, and he gives an example. Here's my example. He doesn't give this example. If you have a person who's a Nobel Prize winner in some field of science, one of a kind of a genius, and he has a 1-year-old child, and he comes home, and he gets it down on the floor, and how does he talk to his child? Like a sophisticated scientist. He gets on the floor and babbles with the child. He babbles because he has to communicate with the child at the child's level. He's not here to interact with the child, to tell the child who he is. So every bit of interaction is for the sake of the child. When Hashem created this world, he created our neshama based on a certain understanding that we should be worthy to have a relationship with him. This is the whole concept of Ramach and Shasa. There was the name of Arizal. The Chofetz Chaim cites this many times, that there are 248 components to the Jewish soul. And if you infuse those in components with mitzvahs, it gives relevance to eternity. It spiritualizes and you have relevance to eternity. Those are advancement mitzvahs. The Shasa Lo Saseh, the 365 negative commandments, is that you shouldn't go off kilter. That's to maintain the wholesomeness of the neshama. Not the neshama should not be compromised. That's a Lo Saseh. So Lamites Malachas is the equivalent, that's the core. As we quoted tomorrow on Shabbos, a person is Machal Shabbos, deliberately violates Shabbos as if he does the Torah its entirety. Shabbos is the core of belief that God is the creator. And creation has a value, has a purpose. So Lamites encompasses the totality of existence. So Ramchal says, God did not create the world to tell us who he is. He created the world to accommodate the objective of creation, that the human being should be able to achieve perfection, that he should be worthy of a relationship with him, which is Olam Haba, which is the world to come. Therefore, it's Shakai. His ability is unending, is infinite. But he reined in on it because it had to be tailor fit for the neshama of the Jew, that every challenge that exists within this existence is only to bring about that level, that objective, which is the perfection of the neshama. So comes out interesting. Lamites is that's the creation of the world. The Lamites Malachos correspond to creation. This is the microcosm. If a person violates a negative commandment, he gets 39 lashes. Why 39? Because when he violated that negative commandment deliberately, what did he do? That's a compromise of his neshama, which has relevance to the creation. It has to be restored. It has to be rehabilitated. How do you rehabilitate it? Through 39 lashes. Because 39 represents totality of existence, 39. Although we said 7 is natural, that's 7, but in terms within the spiritual realm, how the world came about, there were 39, the 39 malachos correspond to the 7 days of creation, how that came about in the spiritual sense. 39 malachos, if you lashes, that's to restore the spirituality which was compromised due to deliberate transgression, and therefore to restore it, he needs 39 malchus. That's a restoration of that spirituality. Rambam says, cooking is taking through fire, taking something that's hard and causing it to become soft. Or take something which is soft and causing it to become hard. For instance, when you take a dough, and you bake it, that it's soft. When you bake it, it dries, it becomes hard. That's baking. When you cook something, let's take raw meat, and you cook it in water or in liquid, the liquid permeates the food, and that softens the food. So you're taking something which is more dense, and the cooking process softens it, because the water, through the cooking process, permeates and flows through that item that's being cooked. For instance, he explains, if you have wet wood, It's Gemara in the seventh parak in Shabbos. So wet wood, you can't use it for firewood. It has to be dried. So the Gemara says if you take wet wood and put it in the oven, to dry it, to be able to use it for kindling wood, putting that wood in the oven, you're in violation of Mavasha. Why? Because that action, you're taking something that's wet, damp, and it's causing it to become dry. You're in violation of Mavasha by doing that. It's not because you're cooking the water in the wood, because the object now is soft, and you want to, through this process, harden it, that it should be in a position to be able to use this kindling wood. Therefore, let's say there's a whole discussion when you put on the electric light and you have an incandescent bulb, meaning you have a filament in the bulb. When you heat that filament, why does the bulb begin glowing? Because that filament is heated to a certain point and it glows. It glows because it's heated to that point. Why does the bulb eventually burn out? Because the filament, through the heating continuously on and off, it's called, like we speak about, the fatigue, metal fatigue. Eventually it just falls, breaks apart. The heating, every time you heat it, that filament softens. And like when you heat metal, comes molten, whatever it is. So when you put on that light, what are you in violation of? Of Mvasha. Not kindling, because the whole question is, it's not fire, it's electricity. So definitely, if you have an incandescent bulb, everybody's in agreement. The violation putting on that bulb, that light, is Mvasha. So then there was the discussion, what about if you have fluorescent bulbs? Fluorescent have no filament. There were gases in there, and they were heated. As a result of that, those gases gave off a light. Everybody agreed. It's definitely not Mavasha. You're not cooking anything. So what's the gas? Melacha? Definitely this Rabbanon. Rabbinically, it's no light. Because before there was no light, you're creating light. But no light is rabbinical. It's not a doraisa no light. So then we have to come on to the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish says when you put on a light, you're completing a circuit. Completing a circuit is binyan. You're building a circuit. So the loch is binyan. So I'm not sure how exactly an LED works. You know, when you put it on, exactly why it activates it, it starts glowing. But again, there's no filament. And there's no light, definitely. So it's rabbinical. There's a whole discussion that, when they brought electricity to Europe, electrified the communities. So Reb Chaim Brisker, and people didn't know what electricity was. So to communicate to the people the provision of using electricity in Shabbos and Yom Tov, Reb Chaim Brisker and Reb Chaim Moser Brzezinski, Zichron Livrocho, they when they said Bor Mireish on Havdalah, they said it on the electric bulb. To make it clear to people that this is Aish, that's fire. They said Bor Mireish. Why? You have a filament, which is the equivalent of the wick, and the wick is burning, is glowing. Through heat, it's glowing. They felt that's sufficient to say Bor Mireish. So people understood putting on the lights is what? That's Mavasha. Or kindling, whatever it was. And people understood that you're not going to put on the lights. But let's say you have a fluorescent bulb, or you have an LED bulb, and you want to say Havdalah. You can't use that bulb because there's no filament. You have to have a bulb which has something equivalent to the filament, and the filament glows, which is the wick being kindled. So although you have light, but that light is not something which is similar to what to fire. So if a woman is in the hospital, so they don't allow you to light candles in the hospital, and you want to light candles, could you say L'havlik der shel Shabbos? Are you able to say that? So if it has the profile, the structure of a flame, a wick and a flame, you could say it, even though it's electricity. But if it doesn't, the woman, who is in the hospital who has to light candles, can't use that as Shabbos candles. We say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, the Chofetz Chaim explains, based on Chazal, that every word of Torah, every word, if you study, let's say in half an hour, you say 1,000, you study 1,000 words, Every word of those 1,000 words is the equivalent of 630 mitzvos. That's the level of energy that it generates, and it creates worlds, and it impacts on this existence that we have no relevance to even understand we can't even fathom what it does. But that it only impacts because God linked our neshama to every aspect of creation. Every aspect of creation is linked to the Jewish soul and to the Jewish behavior. There's that linkage. Therefore, the consequence, positive and negative, is dependent on the behavior of the Jew, not the non-Jew. The non-Jew, when he violates the 7 Noahide laws, has to do with the global universe. Nothing to do with it. Because the non-Jew is not Adam. Only the Adam impacts on existence. If the non-Jew violates the 7 Noahide laws, that has to do with him personally. That particular nation has nothing to do with the Jewish people. When we do the wrong thing, the world either rises or falls. When we do the wrong thing, it diminishes the world. When we do the right thing, it infuses the world with positive energy, the world rises.
Just to slightly add to the discussion, let's not underestimate the creation of the universe, right? The universe is constantly, well, what do I know, but it's constantly expanding, right? It's an enormous, whatever it is, it's enormous. So, and it's not as if we can't perceive that it's enormous, right? We've gotten scientists and whatever astrophysicists that have explained this to us. And then on a micro level, we already know what it is on a micro level in terms of atoms and even smaller. So it's not as if it's, I mean, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago it was unknown, but it's been revealed over the course of time how great creation is. Right.
So I always knew what creation was. Shmuel was an expert. Shmuel says that he understands the gateways of heaven the way he understands the streets, the street map in Erdo, Pumbedisa. These were areas in Babylon, in Iraq. We speak about the Jewish people being the equivalent of stars. A star itself, each one generates its own light. Every Jew has his own power plant, which gives off energies, which makes a difference in the solar universe. And that's the whole concept of Jews are responsible to one another, communal responsibility. And I always mention the Yalkut, the Medrash says, you have two people in a boat, and one person takes a drill and begins boring a hole under his seat. His fellow passenger says, "What are you doing? You realize what you're doing?" He says, "Yeah, I'm boring a hole under my seat." He says, "But you realize what's going to happen?" He says, "But it's under my seat, not under your seat." He says, "It's true, but once that hole is made, we both go down because the water comes into the boat." That's Kol Yisrael Rebbe Zeluzeh. Every Jewish neshama soul is connected to every other soul. In the totality, we're one Jewish people. If we bring a negative energy in there, that's a diminishment in the whole system. And it creates a certain malfunction. And when you bring a positive energy, it enriches the system and advances the system, and we function at a different level as a result of that. That's the concept of Kol Yisrael Rebbe Zeluzeh. That's communal responsibility for that reason. And I always say from the famous word from Yisrael Salanter, when a Jew speaks Lashon Hara in Vilna, it causes another Jew to Michal Shabbos and risk. It's a famous word from Yisrael Salanter. Because the level of clarity, or what we call the Siyata D'Shmaya, which Hashem provides for us, is based on our worthiness. So if the system is fully functional, there's another level of energy which Hashem infuses into us, responds to us. If there's less clarity, and because of the less clarity, that causes Jews to actually cross lines that they should not cross. Moshe Kurdivira writes in the Talmud Dvorah, the whole concept of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. A Jew must love his fellow Jew as he loves himself. It doesn't say you have to love your fellow human being as you love yourself. V'ahavta l'recha. Why l'recha? See, he explains it with the same concept of Kol Yisrael Rebbe Zeluzeh. In essence, when you do for your fellow, you're doing for yourself. Let's say you're running a corporation, and you have you're one of your key employees has a certain expense account. Because when he uses that account, it benefits the company, but it's money out of the employer's pocket. Doesn't make a difference. When he's using that money, that's an advancement. He's advancing the company. Any Jew, when I do for you, I'm doing for myself. That's the concept of Avdarecha Kamocha. Because his neshama is linked to my neshama. So doing for him, in essence, you're doing for yourself. That's the Ramchal. And that's the concept of Kol Yisrael Redim Zelvaseh. Years ago, the Mishnah tells us in Sanhedrin, when you save one Jewish life, it's like saving the whole world. Because Adam, when he was created, he was created not as a pair, he was created as a single individual. Every other living species had a pair, male, female. He was created as a single individual. Why? To communicate the reality of his value, that Bishvili Nivra Olam. The world is created for me. We need this enormous creation to accommodate the needs of one person. There's so many, all the challenges which relate to his neshama is this world. So if God forbid you offer testimony, which is not true, and it's not beyond any doubt that he's guilty, you take that life. Taking that life is tragic beyond our understanding what tragic is. B'shvili nivra olam, the world is created for myself. So it says, therefore, if you save even one life, it's like saving a world. So many years ago, I only lectured over the years, twice in Lincoln Square. Lincoln Square. And there's a woman who came to the lecture. Remember, she came from Knoxville, Tennessee. And I quoted the Gemara, and I said it in English, translated. So she says, why why not kol matzel nefesh? Any human being. Why only the Jew? Right? So I started to explain a little bit. I mean, she wasn't an observant person. She had no idea, of any of this information. What the purpose of Jew is, what anything is. But it's Yisrael. Because B'shvili Nivra Olam. Bereshis Bara Elokim. The objective of creation is for the Jew, because only the Jew has relevance to the Torah itself. Bishul Torah and Bishul Yisrael Bereshis. Anything else, their existence is not for that purpose. They are here to facilitate, to be here to take off the material burden that we should be less distracted from our spirituality. That's the ultimate objective of the other nations. The Mishnah tells us at the end of Uktzin, that when Mashiach comes and there's no longer evil, what are the Gentiles going to do? Every Jew is going to have 2,000 Gentiles doing his bidding, all the material bidding, because we're going to be preoccupied focusing on our spirituality. So every Jew, the Gentiles going to hold on to the tzitzis of the Jew, 2,000 being there, our beck and call to address every physical need, because it's going to be a physical world still until the end of 6,000 years. And that's the purpose of them. The objective is not creation. Their value is to accommodate us, that we should not be distracted from our objective, which is to advance our spirituality. Jews, why don't you mind your own business? In Israel, and if the buses want to run on Shabbos, let the Haredim do what they want, let the seculars do what they want. How do you have a right to infringe and take away the liberties of other people? Right? How do you have a right? It's a good question, but the answer is exactly what we're discussing today. So then I told this person who didn't understand, I said, if you have a brother that you love, and he's about to commit suicide, and he wants to jump off a building, are you going to do whatever you can to prevent him from taking his life? He says, of course. I said, if they would understand what they're violating, what the ramifications of violating Shabbos, what it does to them, you'd also do whatever you can to prevent it from happening. It's like the person who's demented wants to jump off the building. He doesn't understand what he's doing. He wants to end his life. But society would not allow him to end his life. Because they understand, the rational people understand what it means to take a life. That's what I answered him then. But it goes beyond that. It's not only taking his life, his diminishment affects every one of us.